Welcome to My Life Chassidus Applied, episode 486. This program is dedicated in loving memory of Miriam Bas Eliyahu Altes Aleha Shalom and Emerita Baruch Binyamin ben Menucha Lana Altes. Yukusil ben Leah Rochel and Rochel Bas Liba Farkash, dedicated by Pinchas Todris ben Miriam and Sarah Bas Rochel Altes. We are in the first month of Adar, in the Shana Muberes, in this leap year, called a pregnant year, with an extra month of Adar in it. As we've discussed in the previous weeks, the significance of that. But Adar, as we all know, Mishanichnas Adar Marvin Besimcha, as Adar enters, we increase in joy. No matter what the circumstances around us, and we know they're challenging and difficult ones, as we speak. We have our soldiers on front lines fighting difficult war, protecting, defending the men, women, and children of Eretz Yisrael. May they be protected. May Hashem protect all the Eden in Eretz Yisrael and everywhere in the world, and may we already merit the end of this. The Geula Hamitis V'Ashlema will be permanent and lasting peace forever and ever. So it's difficult times, and yet we're still told, Mishanichnas Adam Marben B'Simcha. As we discussed, Simcha is not frivolous joy. It's not ignoring, it's not escapism. It's understanding the circumstances, but digging deeper and realizing the deep joy of being a Jew, the deep joy of having Eretz Yisrael, the deep joy of protecting other people. So though it comes with pain and there are losses, unfortunately, again, Hashem should protect everyone, but we still march ahead with joy, knowing that we have a mission and knowing that we will prevail and we will ultimately vanquish enemies, and above all, bring the world that way it was meant to be from the beginning of time, the mission that the Eden were given, and by extension to be a nation, to be a light unto nations, to also impact the whole world around us. And you see, with all the challenges, there is still and a lot of anti-Semitism, and we hear the noise and we are pained by it, but there are tremendous forces also of support of Eretz Yisrael and of Eden all across the world. What we have to do is do our part. And when we do our part, Hashem will do already His part. So we have to stand proud and strong, confident, fight the battles we have to fight, go all the way. As long as you have an enemy that's declared war on you, it's very clear what needs to be done. The only way for a ceasefire is for total unconditional surrender, return of all the hostages, and completely reneging, completely eliminating and changing the entire constitution and the call for the destruction of Jews and Israel. And then proving it in actions. We'll talk more about this throughout the program, but it's very clear to have that moral clarity and moral compass to know what is right and what is wrong. It's absolutely ludicrous and insanity and actual suicide to expect anyone to call for a ceasefire when the enemy has not laid down their arms and is not surrendered. It's as simple as that. Of course, we do everything possible to protect and save our hostages, but at the same time, we can't all be held hostages by these enemies who are cynically using Jews, the Jewish hostages, as well as their own people as shields. So we have to go strong, do what has to be done through and through, then dictate the terms like a true winner. And out of strength, you always get true peace and lasting peace. Any type of peace that comes from weakness is not peace. Just call it what it is. So Adar empowers us with the simcha and the confidence, and the joy, the inner joy, and the inner strength and fortitude to fulfill the mission for which we were sent to this world. This includes now, yes, vanquishing an enemy. So even that is done with simcha. Not simcha because we want to fight a war. Not simcha because we want to kill anyone. Not even a simcha. We don't even celebrate the fall of our enemies. We celebrate that we have a cause that we're representing, the cause of God. And in this dir b'tachtein, making a home for God in this lowest of worlds, it includes, unfortunately, also dealing with darkness and bringing light into the darkest place. So now, month of Adar gives us that additional joy, that additional strength. It's keiches, it's strength. That's what it comes down to. Again, joy is not just celebrating, it's not just dancing and singing. Joy is an inner strength. That's why it has the power to be Peretz Geder. And what more power do we need now that Peretz Geder to pierce through all resistance, to break through all barriers. And now in this year we have 2 months of joy because of the Shana Muberes, 2 months of continuous joy and growing joy. And as we discussed, in a Shana Muberes, in a leap year, because of the deficit of the lunar year, we actually increase even more, a whole month, in this case 2 months. The additional month and the month of Adar, the regular month of Adar, regular, meaning the usual month of Adar. So may we experience that joy and see it b'simcha seidom al reisham in the most revealed possible way. Simcha is about gilui. It's about revealed, not just concealed, but in the most revealed way. Teva nirva nigla, for all those that have been challenged, that all those are under challenges, their families, and everyone else around us. We're all part of one larger family. So that's just opening words about this month of Adar in context of the events going on. And of course, Chassidus is so much based on Simcha, one of the Yesodis, one of the foundations of the Baal Shem Tov. Even though all the foundations were there before, but the Baal Shem Tov turned it into something that became a fundamental principle, the importance to be Pirush Baal Shem Tov, to spread, to disseminate. And one of them is serving God with joy, constant joy, even when there are times that are difficult, to realize that there's a deeper Simcha in life itself and the very purpose we were given. And the very mission we were given by Hashem, this indispensable mission. What greater joy is there knowing that you have such a mission? So Chassidus applied the emphasis of Chassidus in general on the concept of Simcha. So let us go through a few specific questions. Firstly, about the month of Adar. Then we'll talk about some things in the Parsha, and other questions that keep coming in. I want to just say, we'll call it a brief announcement, if I may, that this program has now been going for 11 years. We're already in the 11th year. My Life Chassidus supplied. Thousands, tens of thousands of questions have come in. We've tried to cover them all. There are many more questions that I've not addressed yet. But I want to tell everyone who's asked the questions, every question is read and every question is carefully considered. We just have to prioritize now with the war and other timely issues. That obviously takes priority. But I will address every possible issue that I can. So keep asking the questions. Don't in any way refrain from doing so. At ChassidusSupply.com we have a forum where you could ask any question anonymously. Nothing is taboo, nothing is off limits. And there are many questions that I did not address so much in this period in time. But even in this time, listen, life goes on in the sense where people still have struggles, and still people have their personal issues, family issues, and so many other psychological, emotional topics. So this is a place that I please see it as your home, as your place that you can just open up and know fully well and trust that there will not be any breach of confidence, frankly, because when you submit a question, nobody, including myself, knows who it is. It's completely anonymous. If you do want to reach out and want us to know who you are, please write your email or other contact information. You also find at ChassidusSupply.com, which is an all outgrowth of this, over the last 10 years, a whole array of resources that can help learn Chassidus, understand Chassidus, teach Chassidus, both in the class I give daily in Ayin Beis, which we've concluded Ayin Beis, but we're now learning, and I don't want to be a spoiler here. Check it out. You'll see we're learning something now that really helps us understand the end of Ayin Beis, because the Rebbe Rashab never concluded the Hemshech. And many other resources that you can feel free to take advantage of, and please do. Okay. So with that said, let us go to some questions and lessons from Adar. Big question, what does this week's Torah portion and time period teach us today? So we'll start with the time period, Adar. Okay. What is the acronym of the word Adar? So in a Sikha, did the Rebbe ever say that Adar stands for Aleph Dar? Aleph Dar, which means that Aluf Yisrael will make a dir b'tachtenim, essentially meaning when Mashiach will come in Adar. The answer is absolutely. I believe it was in the year Tafshin Nun Aleph. I may be wrong about that, but definitely in those years. And the Rebbe actually cited the Eira Teira from the Tzemach Tzedek, who teaches Aleph Dar. Aleph, as you say, Aluf Yisrael, master of the world. Dar, who resides. So Adar represents Adira, the concept of Aleph and Dar, which of course also fits with the Parshas we read, from Truma to Tzava, throughout till the end of Sefer Shmeis, all about V'shachanti b'seicham, how the Eberster, V'osili migdash v'shachanti b'seicham, the Aleph is Dar b'tachtenim. The question is, what's the connection to Simcha? But the way the person wrote the question, talked about being Mashiach will come another. So the answer is very straightforward. Simcha is a natural state when things are in the way they should be. When we're sad, God forbid, or despondent, there's a disconnect. Simcha is a state of natural joy, a natural seamlessness. That's why you see children are born generally happy. Simcha is the natural state of the soul. So indeed, we have to be reminded and told in this world, because there are many reasons people can find difficulty to finding that joy, but that's the natural state. So when you say something is in a state of a dira, Chassidus explains that dira b'tachtenim, dira leis baruch. So like a home. In a home, a person dira latzmuse. When you're in the street, or at work, or outside of your home, you always have to have some defense mechanisms, some armor, some garments that you wear to protect yourself, to adjust, to maneuver in a world around you. When you come home, a true home is a complete comfortable place. A dir, where you feel completely comfortable. Your defenses are down, there's no reason to protect yourself. Absolute trust. Again, I'm talking about a healthy home. What the Eberster wanted, which is the ultimate paradox, that dafken tachtenim, and tachtenim, as the Alter Rebbe explains in chapter 36 in Tanya, means the lowest, not in space, the lowest in revelation, where there's no divine revelation at all. He says, it's the lowest, nothing can be lower. In what? In the Helam, the Hester, what he calls cheshach, koflam, a double and quadruple darkness, that you don't see the divine, like in the higher worlds. You have to seek out godliness. And on the contrary, it's molek klippos v'sitra achra, a world filled with negative, antithetical things to godliness. Selfishness, corruption, duplicity, and all that comes with that, discord. I won't even go into the worse than that, violence and war and so on. And dafkin tachtenim, as he continues, even furthermore, the wicked prosper, to the point that they yell out, Aniva afsi aid, me and nothing else. The truth is, Ein Eid Malvadi, nothing but God. And people say the exact opposite. Not only I'm also existent, only I exist. And dafka there, specifically, explicitly there, Nesava Kodesh Baruch, as Chassidus says, Atzmusei is Baruch. Nesava. The God desired, dafka there, in a place like that, this world, should be a diri b'tachtein. Dor. The Aleph should be Dor. So you would think, how could God be comfortable in a place like this? And that's Taka the Kavanah. That's the power we have to reveal the Koyach Atzmus, the power of Atzmus, and not just the presence of Atzmus in this world. So, that is the most natural state of Simcha. That's why Losad Lovi, it says, Ozimol Eschek Pinei, that's when we will smile. Laughter, joy will be natural. Because that's what happens when you're completely natural in your place. You laugh, you smile, you're comfortable. That's the connection between Adar and Aleph Dar. And the lesson to us is very clear. That's what we need to do. Yes, we live in a world with difficulty. T'mola Oretz, Chomos. You have to deal with Hamas and all its meanings. You have to deal with the wrath and the anger and the pain and the atrocities and the deaths. But it's in this place where we have the power to make a home for the God. Not just a temporary place, a home, a permanent home. And sometimes we even add a basiligani, a garden, a place of pleasure. That's our power. And that's why we are besimcha, because we know even in a place like this, it would be one thing you could say, finding godliness in beauty, in light, when things are going well. But in tachtenim, that's the ultimate simcha, that you have the ability, saz v'sameach, that God has joy, dafke, yismach Yisrael be'esav, yismach Hashem b'maisav, that the simcha, dafke in this lowest of worlds. So is it a paradox? Yes, because on one hand it's lowest, it's dark, and at times it's not easy. But we have to always know there's something more powerful than the difficulties. And that's the mission for which we were charged. And Magdim Refuah Lamaka, that before the illness we were given the healing. And Enim Avakashel Lifikechon, we were not given a challenge we can overcome. The Fum Gam Shichna, the weight is always commensurate to what we're capable of lifting, and so on. And that all gives us that power in the acronym of Adar, Aleph Dar. Next question. Does the joy in Adar have the power to transform true darkness? So someone wrote it out more detailed. Dear Rabbi Jacobson, we know the energy of Purim affects the entire month because it says Mishanichnas Adar Marben B'Simcha, and how much more so when there are two others. One aspect of Purim is V'napach, where everything is upside down and topsy-turvy. Haman tried to annihilate us, and the opposite happened, and we survived and thrived. Can we also apply this energy of V'napach in our daily lives during the months of Adar? Perhaps some people were struggling to find Shidduchim, and now the opposite should happen, and the Shadchan should call and read many names of potential Shidduchim. Maybe some people were struggling financially, and now the opposite should happen, and they should miraculously become wealthy. Over 100 hostages are still held captive, and the opposite of captivity should happen, and they should safely be freed. And we have lived in Golos for 2,000 years, and now the opposite should happen, and we should have Geula with the full revelation of Mashiach. Amen. Absolutely. This is the month of any month. So, the answer to the question, does the power of Adar, does the joy in Adar have the power to transform true darkness? Exactly. That is the whole point of the joy of Adar. This transformation. And everything you said and much more should happen and could happen. Why is that? Because remember, darkness and light are two forces, are two tracks. The Eibusha is higher than both. Darkness does not darken before him. And Chassidus explains darkness ultimately and light are two tracks, two divine energies. This is part of God's way of concealing. It's also a strength. Our goal is to reveal the divine strength within Gvur. And as he explains in Teira Sholem, in the famous Sikha, Simchas Teira Ayin Beis, where he speaks about why Lehediyah B'nei Adam Gvur, to let them know that Koyach Atzmi, the power, the essential power that lies in concealment, even more than Gilui, because to refrain, to hold back, requires even a deeper strength. And that's our job, is to reveal that. And when you reveal that, even the darkness gets transformed, and on the contrary, it's even a deeper light, because it comes from the darkness. That's the power of this month, yes. Is the joy in Adar initiated from above or through our work below? Is the Aveda Meshanichnas Adar Marben B'Simcha done literally lamata lamayla? Meaning we have to initiate doing things to increase in joy? Or is it lamayla lamata where Hashem initiates it by revealing an extra energy for joy? And if we tune into it, then we'll be able to be extra happy and joyous. The truth is both. Because when we say Misha Nichnas Adar, it means the month itself has that power. That means God implanted in Adar that power. But obviously, like everything, Chassidus explains, when you make a keli through Aveda, it's more permanent, it's more sustainable, it's more internalized. The powerful sikha from the Rebbe in Tafshin Yud Zayin, it was the same kviyas like this year, Shushim Purim Cotton, Parshas Ki Tisa, Tafshin Yud Zayin, 1957. And the Rebbe spoke about the word, he mentioned that year, Bas Legani in the Maimer, from the Alter Rebbe. Then we say, Merubim Tzarchi, Daitem Ktsarim, Merubim Tzarchi Amchem, V'daitem Ktsara. Which means that the needs are many, that people's needs of your nation are many. But their minds are very, very limited. So he teaches there from the Alter Rebbe that because Daitem Ktsarim, that's why Merubim Tzarchi Amchem. Generally, you teach the opposite. Because then there's so much pressure on us, and the needs are so many, and we don't have the ability. We're overwhelmed. There he says, "Daitem ktsara." When a person is daitem ktsara, that's what causes that he should feel that he's overwhelmed. So the answer is to be daitem rechava, to have expansive mind. The Rebbe explains there at length the idea when you have an expansive mind, then you can contain a lot more. And he explains that when we make an effort, it's not just something that Hashem, we ask God to take away our overwhelming challenges and pressures. Then when we have an attitude that's a positive attitude, that itself opens up the channels of simcha and joy. Worthwhile reading the sikha in this context. So truth is, it's both directions, but like everything, you want to have it internalized, you want to have the avodah always adds to whatever we receive from above. If we defeated Amalek on Purim, why are we still facing enemies like Hamas? Okay. So, firstly, well, it's true that if not all, but probably almost all commentaries explain that Amalek, the mitzvah, was already fulfilled, and there's no more such a thing as actual Amalek, even though symbolically there's still Amalek, the concept of Suffolk, Amalek is Suffolk, the concept of Kridus, Kalkar, apathy, Amalek, to fight the Amalek within us. But if there's an actual nation called Amalek, most opinions are no, there isn't, at least not that we know who they are. But that doesn't mean there aren't so-called offshoots. So Rashis going Amalek, so Chassidus explains Rashis, because Amalek is the mucker of all the klippim. In other places it says that about Mitzrayim, that Mitzrayim is Reish Kol Agolius, and Kol Agolius, all the exiles are called on the name Mitzrayim. It's Kesed of Klippah. But regardless, you're talking about here root Klippus, that from which are derived the others. So the fact that you have enemies, whether physical ones or spiritual ones or emotional or psychological ones, mean in some way there's still a manifestation of the tumah, of the toxins of Amalek. So that's why Purim, indeed, we read before Purim about Amalek, and Purim is the Mechias Amalek through reading about Haman, and that's why we stomp our feet and so on when it comes to that. It's symbolic of eliminating the Amaleks. So whether it's a physical manifestation or not, it's still an enemy. And as long as Mashiach is not here, unfortunately we see there is an enemy. So the answer is, until the Golus is not completely over, Akata Avdad Achashverosh Anan, we're still servants of Achashverosh in a certain way, even though it's not under Persian rule, but we're still under Shibud Malchus to some extent, till Mashiach comes. And the fact is, even in Eretz Yisrael, with all the blessings, we still have to contend with enemies. So that's why you still have that concept. Again, whether it's called Amalek or it's called the spiritual type of Amalek or spiritual resistance or spiritual enemy, one form or another, it's there. So the answer really, the question has to be is, why do we have enemies altogether? Why can't the Gula come? And my answer is, it's exactly what we're hoping for. And as the Rebbe said, in acronym, I have that question myself. I don't have an answer to that. So the answer is, with Purim, we destroyed Amalek, just like by Mitzrayim we destroyed the Egyptians. It gives us tremendous strength to deal with enemies, and we see, even though b'chol der v'der emdim aleinu l'chaleseinu, in every generation they rise, we ultimately prevail. But they're still there. They're still forces, and they're true, much less than it used to be, but we still need to eradicate it all. Baruch hatuma avim min haaretz, and completely be able to experience Geula, and only teiv, ach teiv l'Yisrael. Only goodness. And one more question in this vein. In a Yom Yom this week, it quotes the Rebbe Rashab saying, quote in English, called free translation, loose translation. I'm certain that when a chassid is in the Beis HaMedrash, teaching or reciting a Maimer of Chassidus to others, my forebears are filled with joy, and their joy is adequate to provide that chassid and his children and children's children with an abundance of blessing materially and spiritually. My question for Rabbi Jacobson is this. I've studied and taught many Maimorim to others, but I'm still struggling financially. What exactly do I need to do to receive and actualize this bracha for abundance of material blessings? Okay, well, this goes into the big category of questions where we do what as the Torah says we should do, and the Torah promises us reward and blessings, gashmis and beruchnis. So indeed, this adds, Rebbe Rashab adds it regarding learning Chassidus, teaching Chassidus. So I don't have an answer why it has not been revealed completely. But as the Rebbe would say, the Rebbe says in many of his letters and many of his answers, maybe it was revealed. Look at the blessings you do have. Sometimes we focus on the things we don't have. What about the children you have? Health, other things. So we should never take for granted. Does it mean there couldn't be more blessings? Absolutely. So to say that the Rebbe Rashab's words are not fulfilled, I don't know your life and I can't speak for you, but I would suggest and I would strongly believe that there are probably quite a few blessings. And the Rebbe wrote this to many people. Look at the blessings. At the same time, we obviously ask Hashem, give us more blessings, not to satisfy Misha Yeshle Monad, it's a Messiah, we want even more. But we forge ahead with absolute faith and absolute trust, betachon, that the blessings will be fulfilled. So when a person learns Chassidus, teaches Chassidus, besides Char Mitzvah, that alone brings blessing, it will also bring blessings in all the matters that the Rebbe Rashab says. And again, I would venture to say that the blessings are there already, and that we want more. But there's no such thing as ever a resignation or surrender or didn't work out. That doesn't exist in our lexicon. Nowhere will you find from the Rebbe ever he says, you're right, didn't work out. It's working out. Sometimes we see it more, sometimes we see it less, and sometimes it's our attitude. Our attitudes. Many people just don't focus on all the blessings, and they just focus what they don't have. And it's time to have more simcha by looking at the blessings that we each have in our lives. Okay. So let's move now to Parshas Ki Tisa. This parsha is a very powerful parsha. It's a parsha where it's one of the greatest. It is the greatest, as Rashi says at the end of Chumash, when it says, "L'chola eses va'amevshim asher asa Moshe le'enei kol Yisrael." What was the greatest one of all? Shviras haluchas, the breaking of the tablets to save the Jewish people, as Rashi explains in this week's chapter. And that's the story in this week's chapter. The first Moshe receives the Torah, then he goes up on Mount Sinai, and they didn't build the Chet Egel, the golden calf. And then Hashem says, Leichrei, go down and see what they did. Moshe breaks the tablets. Rashi explains quite deliberately, not out of anger. That's why Hashem said, Yesher Kechecha Sheshivarta, as Rashi says at the end of Chumash, classic Sikh of Simchas Torah, Tov Shemem Zayin, with the Rebbe amidst tears, unprecedented tears. Explains the Rashi, explains Moshe Rabbeinu's Mesiras Nefesh. Erase my name from this Sefer Achaim, Sefer Torah, if you're not going to forgive the people. And Moshe prevails. And that's why we have Yom Kippur. And he receives the second tablets. So this is an unprecedented feat, as I said, Le'enei kol Yisrael. Last Rashi in Chumash, but based on this week's chapter. And indeed, it's the last Fabrengen the Rebbe Le'es Ata. Till this day, the Rebbe was Magia, the full Sikha, was Parshas Ki Tisa, Tov Shinun Beis, 1992. When you read the Sikha, though at the time we didn't know it, you look back, you see, wow. He starts the whole Fabrengen, the whole Sikha starts, that this Parsha is a Parsha Klolis. Every chapter is a all-encompassing one, but this one specifically, you see, he says all of life and all of Ishtalshalos is in this chapter. The highest point, the lowest point, and the transformation. The highest point is the first tablets, Matan Torah. The low point of Chet Egel, Mamash idolatry. And then the Tshuva and the Luchas Shniyos of Yom Kippur. Salachti kidvarecha, Moshe prevailed over Hashem to forgive the people. You can see when you read the Sikha that the Rebbe was like, in a way, summing up the whole Seder HaAvodah, his own. As I said, tragically, we'd find out soon, a little while later, Chav Zayin Adar. So the last Vabrein was Vayakel Tov Shinun Beis, but the last Mugadik, a full edit of Vabrein is Vayakel, is Ki Tisa. Talks about the themes of this week's chapter. So let's talk some details. Before we get to details, the first obvious lesson is there's no such thing as impossible. There's no such thing as damaged goods. There's no such thing as we've hit a dead end. That's the first thing you learn from it. And Moshe demonstrated it. He would not take no for an answer. So when we're facing challenges, and sometimes they can be overwhelming and very difficult, we learn from Moshe, you don't stop knocking on the door. Can't do it in 40 days, 80 days. And it took him 80 days. And you finally prevail. Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the year because one man stood up to Hashem, to God, and would not take no for an answer. The birth of hope, the birth of forgiveness, the birth of hope. You know what hope is? Hope is even if mistakes are made, there's always hope, there's always a future. It's one thing to say no mistakes were made, but if once mistakes are made, you could say, hey, too bad. No. Yom Kippur, Yom HaKippurim, Day of Atonement, Achaz Bashana. So if anybody ever has a doubt, and when you look at what is the formidable strength, the relentless power of the Rabbeim, even in the most dire and difficult of circumstances, it's exactly what Moshe understood. I will do whatever it takes and I will prevail. And he did prevail. And it serves for us as a shining example till this day, how a man stood up and would not take no for an answer from Hashem. And with good reason. They built a golden calf, idolatry, Yarek Val Yaver. You're supposed to die before you idolatry, Avodah Zarah. And just 39 days after they heard, they shouldn't have false gods. And yet Moshe understood they have to do tshuva, but he knew that he wanted something from Hashem. Give me a back door, open up, and let me know there's a ray of hope. There's no such thing as impossible. Don't tell me that it's too late. There's no such thing as too late. Reishis Chochmah says something tremendous. The Rebbe brings it a few places in Fabrengens. So we all know the story of Acher, Elisha ben Avuya, one of the greatest Tanoim, one of the four that went to the Pardes. But he came out scathed. He did not come out like Rabbi Akiva, Nichtas b'Shalom v'Yotzer b'Shalom. He became an apostate. And after that, they called him Acher, the dismissive Acher, the other. They call someone the other. And he's the classic Yudeas Rebbeinu Machavelim Ridbe. He knew his master, and he deliberately defied him, deliberately rebelled. To the point that even Gehenna did not want to take him in when he passed away. He needed a whole davening and prayer to allow him, his neshama, to just even go to Gehenna. I mean, the stories are fascinating, but they're also extremely painful to read about a man like that. Rab Meir was one of his students. Rab Meir continued learning with him even after this happened. And it was Shabbos, and he was riding on a horse on Shabbos. And Rab Meir is learning from him. And later when he's criticized, how could you learn from a man like that? He said, Klipos ezarak, I throw out the peel, and I eat the fruit. He was riding on the horse. Rab Meir is walking near him on Shabbos, learning Torah from him. And Elisha ben Avuya, Acher, sensed there was Tchum Shabbos. They came to the border where you're not supposed to walk further. And he tells Rab Meir, you need to go back now. It's Shabbos. Man, at that level, that's what he's telling him. And Rab Meir says to him, why don't you come back with me? He says, for me, it's too late. And indeed, says the Reishis Chochmah, when he comes up to heaven, they said, why didn't you do tshuva? Because he's, you know, ein lecha davar eimid b'fnei tshuva. Nothing stands in the way of tshuva. And what did Elisha ben Avuya answer? He says, yeah, but I heard the baskol. I heard the voice from heaven. Ein lecha davar eimid b'fnei tshuva chutz ma'acher. Everybody can do tshuva except Acher. And Hashem says to him, but you know the din better than anyone. What does the din say? Kol masha balabayis emelcha say chutz. Another chutz, mitzay. Everything the owner, the master tells you to do when you come to someone's house and he's the host, everything the host tells you to do, you're supposed to do, except if he tells you to leave. So when you heard chutz ma'acher, that you should not have listened to. The halacha clearly says you don't have to listen to the master. In this case, the master of the entire world, Melech Malchem Lochem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the master of the house, Adenu Shalel, Alufa Shalel. That's what it says. That you should have known, that you should have knocked down the door, like we see Moshe Rabbeinu did. Just to show you, there's no such thing as impossible. There's no such thing as a dead end. And indeed, you see that. You see the Rebbe's approach. You see Bechal, the Torah approach, Chassidus approach, because we're dealing with an Eibishter here. Eibishter is Kol Yochli, he could figure it out. Of course there are rules and there are guidelines, and that's why you have to knock on the door. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu had to do what he did, like we read in this week's Parsha. So you read this week's Parsha, one of the things that strikes you is the dedication, the passion. A Moshe, literally, in an intimate way, you see, like he's speaking, like he says in the Pasuk, Moshe spoke to Hashem like a person speaks to his friend. Why does the Torah have to tell us that? Like someone speaking to his friend. Intimate. And it is intimate, to the point that Moshe finally says to Hashem, I want to see you, I want to see your face. And that's when Hashem says, no one can see my face and live. It's a whole discussion of its own, which we reviewed a number of times here. The point is, this parsha carries tremendous lessons in hope, in the ability to achieve even the seemingly unachievable. So that's lesson number one overall. And it's good for all times, especially in difficult times. So when we ask the question, what can we learn from Moshe challenging and prevailing over God to forgive the people? You learn the power of resilience, the power of relentless pursuit, the power that, because we're empowered by Hashem himself, we can achieve anything we set our mind to. And never ever think that something, there's a no. You may not get it exactly the way you understand it, but you prevail. Salachti kidvarecha, which we say right after Kol Nidre, Yom Kippur night, 3 times. God says, I've forgiven them as you've spoken. A man stood up to God and prevailed. And it wasn't easy. It took a long time, but he prevailed. So that's lesson number one above all. So the question is like this. If Moshe Rabbeinu could challenge Hashem directly and say, if you don't forgive the nation for making a golden calf, then blot my name out of your book, can we also challenge Hashem and say, if you don't help return the rest of the hostages safely right away, then blot out our names out of your book? So we learn from Moshe many things. Whether we can say that, if you can find it in your heart, sincerely feel as Moshe did, then it's between you and God. It's not a game. It's not just, okay, Moshe said it, now I'm also going to say it. Moshe said that, you can imagine, it was not a simple matter. We're not talking about a book. We're talking about Teiras Chaim. Not just Teiras Chaim, we're talking about the Teira, Etzem HaTeira. Who knew what it was more than Moshe? He wasn't just giving up Elam Hazeh, physical world, or even Elam Haba, spiritual. He was giving up his very connection. Our connection, Atem Advekim B'Hashem Elkeichem Chaim Kol Chamayim. Our very connection is connected through Teira Chayenu Ve'erech Yameinu. It's like saying, cut me out from life and my life and sustenance, which is you. Moshe was able to bring to a place like that. His love for Eden was so deep. He felt, if you don't forgive them, what purpose do I have? Not just in this world, also in the world to come. So I don't know if we can just easily and flippantly just cite that. But we can definitely learn about Mesiras Nefesh. So before you say, cut me out from the book, which I don't find that most people are on that level, maybe you should just try getting out of your comfort zone a little. Maybe foregoing some of your little pleasures in this world. So let's not jump to Macheni no Mesifrecha. Just maybe give up a few things that you find that are critical in your life, but they're just moisedous. They're just extras, they're unnecessary. That would also be something. Getting out of your comfort zone can achieve tremendous things if you want to indeed affect Lamaila. So it's not just saying a prayer or giving tzedakah in honor of the hostages. Maybe do something that hurts a little. I mean, hurts in a good way. Giving tzedakah in a way that, as they say, until it hurts. More than your comfort zone. Like he says in Tanya Perek Tezvav 15. To go beyond your routine. Even good routines and habits. To be Avid Elikim, you have to go beyond your, even if you learn 100 times and review your Torah 100 times, it's still your comfort zone, it's still your habit, your routine. So I would begin with that before the Machenina. Begin with things that go out of your own way, and that opens up channels, like Alter Rebbe explains in Torah Miketz. B'chol Moedecha means bli gvul, but human beings are gvul, we're finite creatures. But when we go out of our comfort zone, when we go out of our natural routines, that awakens the true bli gvul above. Because on the echazdik level, qualitatively, we've gone out of our regular structures, our parameters. That's what's requested, especially in a time of war, to behave like a warrior, meaning waking up earlier, realizing it's not business as usual, doing things differently, not in continuing to indulge and say, okay, I'm going to say a prayer here and there. If you really want to do something, I'm challenging you in return, do something that makes a difference, that you know you've gone beyond your regular. And not just because it's comfortable. You've gone beyond that. That's how you invoke, if you want God to go beyond his regular. That's what we learn from Moshe. He went beyond his, and Hashem then went beyond his own. Kavyochel. Okay. Is there a connection between the broken tablets and the shattered containers of Tohu? Does Chassidus teach that there's a connection between the shards of the luches, the tablets that Moshe broke, and the shards of Elam Tohu that shattered when the vessels couldn't contain the light? There is a connection, obviously. Shvira is shvira. And generally speaking, when something breaks, it can be for two reasons. Either because the light is too strong, so it just shatters because it can't be contained, or the light is too little, so it shatters because it's out of hunger, so to speak. It's like starved. So when it comes to any type of break, you're referring to a type of trauma. Trauma is a break, a shock to the system. When Moshe broke the tablets, it was a shock to the system after the Eden built a golden calf after they just heard the of God, they stood by Matan Torah. The only proper response was a shock. Couldn't just say, oh, okay, they sinned, let's move on. It's a shake-up. Rashi says, as I alluded to before, that when he broke the tablets, it was like tearing the ksuba, the marriage contract, saying to Hashem, you see, they didn't receive it yet. They heard it, but they didn't sign it. They didn't receive it yet. This wasn't just a trick to say, okay, they're not fully responsible because they didn't sign it. It was also showing, yeah, they're not ready for it yet. And I will make sure they become ready. And Moshe did his work until they earned the second tablets, which were complete. But in the ark, we find both tablets, both the complete second tablets and also the shattered. Why the shattered? They're already shattered because the shattering itself is a lesson. As Chassidus explains, as Shei Seisa Amanas Livnes. He didn't shatter just to shatter. The shattering was in order to bring tshuva, a much better and more permanent form of luchas. Not quite necessarily the divine power that the first luchas have, but now it came through the hard work of tshuva, the hard work of a broken heart. Nothing is complete as a broken heart. So there are many parallels that you can learn from Tohu in Shviras HaLuchas, in the Shviras HaKelim. And above all, as I said, that the goal is Sesam and Nas Livnes, to bring the world of tikkun, that repairs, and repairs even better than it was before, like what Shuv is supposed to do. Strengthen us in a way that you can't even be capable of doing what you did before. So initially, it was a terrible crime, but what came of it can be much greater, as he explains in Samach Vov, the Maimorim, a sinner gets rewarded with the second luchas, which are even higher than the first luchas, as the Gemara says, that through it we have Teresh Peh, and so on. He came because of a sin, and he explains there the whole process of the tshuva that comes after a break, and you reached a deeper level, like the whole theme of Samach Vov, that through Yegiyah and Kabbalah Sale, through effort and Kabbalah Sale, we reach places that you could not reach in regular. The first luchas was more Mamayl Lamata Er Yashar, but the Er Chezer that comes from hard work creates a more qualitative, a more permanent, a more internalized process. So ultimately, it's a goal of joining La'asovet Tzadikai B'Tiyufte, both the Veda of Tzadikim, of the Luchas Hashenis, and Balei Tshuva, the Luchas Shniyas. But the Luchas Shniyas add a whole dimension, which is what Golus adds, what darkness adds. So that's some of the parallels that we can associate to that message and its relevance to our time. Okay. Is the October 7th massacre and subsequent war a punishment for building the golden calf? Well, let me read it in more detail. Not necessarily the same golden calf of biblical times, but perhaps a modern version of idolatry. Is that the cause of the October 7th massacre? Today we worship, follow, and deify influencers on social media instead of worshiping Hashem and Hashem's Torah. Hashem needs more likes and follows on Instagram than all the others have. Okay. Well, in general, we don't point fingers, especially when it comes to tragedies. So I'm not here to point fingers. We do what the Rambam says. We learn from it. It's a wake-up call to learn from it. And we don't look at others, we look at ourselves. If you feel that in your life you could be worshiping Hashem in a more complete way and not have even a semblance of a golden calf, whether the worship of money or power, or as you said, influencers or other materialistic things, by all means. That's the lesson you learn. So to point fingers and say that's why it happened, that not. But to learn from it, by all means. This is definitely a wake-up call. A wake-up call to look at our own unity and love for each other, to focus on the true values of what we stand for, what a Yid is, what a Yisrael is. All that is meant to be part of this wake-up call. So that's how I would put it. Now it does say that the Chet HaEgel, is that every Chet in history has something from the Chet HaEgel. Because it's like a klolosdik, it's an all-encompassing type of dissonance that it created. Like Chet Tzadas, because it was a recreation, a reliving, they say like a re-traumatizing of the trauma of the Chet Tzadas. That's why by Matan Teda, Poskuzu Moson, that toxins, those toxins were eliminated, or seized, I should say, paused by Matan Teda, but then Chet Egel brought it back. So in every sin there is that, because those are the root sins that demonstrate the dissonance between us and God. Instead of being channels of Hashem Echad, a type of idol, there's another force, another partner in this, another replacement, if you wish. So in that sense, there's a concept of Chet HaEgel in every sin, in every disconnect that we have. And the way we repair it is by connecting. More Avos Hashem, more Avos Yisrael, more Achdus Yisrael, more tzedakah, more love, and doing everything possible to reconnect existence, the world, and your life with God's plan. That's the solution. That's the antidote. Okay. How is it possible that people could transgress such a grave sin of idolatry just 39 days after the great revelation at Sinai? Free choice is only possible, and people could sin because godliness is mostly concealed. The tzimtzum, yes. But how is it possible that people could sin with making a golden calf after such a great revelation of godliness during the giving of the Torah? So first of all, even with the giving of the Torah and all its unprecedented power that it introduced alienim l'tachtenim, that we can now integrate and join matter and energy, the divine and existence, it still did not negate the tzimtzum. Maybe temporarily they had that experience. So there's still a tzimtzum addition, and people still have free will. So that's number one that we have to know. Number two, there's the concept of kol hagodel mechavere yitzrei godel mimenu. The greater the person, the greater his challenges. So it's true they were an enlightened generation, and they experienced unbelievable revelations and miracles with the exodus from Egypt and then parting of the sea and of course Matan Teda. But they also had a great Yetzer Hara. They had great, because there's always Zeluma Ze'os Alikim, God also creates an opposing voice that's as powerful as the positive voice. And finally, there's different explanations given that explain what were they thinking. There's a very powerful sikha from the Rebbe. They were trying to replace Moshe Rabbeinu because they had counted, they saw he hadn't come down, so they needed a Moshe. So maybe their intentions may even been in some ways some pure intentions. But bottom line, it was a grave, grave sin. Because even if intentions are good, the bottom line is they wandered away from the promise. Hashem gave you the Torah. You have one God. Why are you building other things? With all the kavanas. What teaches us, never take your life for granted, your blessings. You may have all the revelations in the world. But sometimes great revelations also bring a certain lull, a certain letting down your guard, taking it for granted, certain apathy even. So there are many lessons that can be learned, that even when you're in great heights, when you're very successful, you think, if I'm successful, everything. success has its own challenges, among other lessons that we can learn from this. Okay. Now, a few follow-ups regarding the war going on. There's also other questions I wanted to address regarding the Mashiach questions that were not finished completely previous weeks. Also about Zionism, so I'm going to try to cover as much as I can. First, let me deal with two questions that were connected directly to the events in the Middle East. So I hope this question doesn't offend anyone. The goal is obviously to come to the answer, not the question. But someone wrote, why not support a Palestinian state? So we know, of course, how much the Rebbe opposed a two-state solution, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But here's how the question wrote it. If the Jews have a right to have a country in Israel, and the French have a right to have their own country, just as most groups do, why are we against the Palestinians having their own country? I'm not condoning their extremists and terrorists, but of the vast majority of Palestinians who are not part of Hamas, just want their own country and autonomy, why can't we support them? Okay, so here we have to have a little history and also facts and so on. Firstly, let's make this clear. Let's just go back to why the Rebbe was opposed to a two-state solution, so to speak, and even the discussion of it. Number one, let's talk about Siman Shin Chav Tes. When you have a sworn enemy, even if they come to deal with you in trade, and they were sincere about it, they're still your sworn enemy. They declared war on you. You have to mobilize on Shabbos to protect yourself. We're dealing with a sworn enemy that has declared war on Israel numerous times and proven it in actions. So we're not dealing with a neutral situation. We're not dealing with someone that is your neighbor and wants to discuss terms of how we divide the driveway or how we share resources and so on. And if you need proof, you see what happened on October 7th, that is being called October 7th. So as soon as you have a situation like that, what kind of two-state solution? What? You're going to give your enemy a state inside of you or near you? Under those circumstances, would the United States do that? If Mexico decided it wants a little piece of Texas, or in downtown Detroit, the Arab population said they want a little part of Detroit. It's ludicrous. That's number one. So you're dealing with an enemy. Now, you'll say there are some people who maybe not declared war, but the majority have declared war. Or if not the majority, the minority that controls the government has declared war. So it's like saying the Nazis declared war against Jews, and there are millions of Germans that were not agreeing with them. Yeah, but they elected them, and they were silent, and that they represented them. So you have to keep that in mind as well. That's the situation on the ground. That's not theory. So the Rebbe says, what, are you giving up land for peace? Peace for peace. You want to make peace? Make peace. Live in peace. Don't attack. Demonstrate that you're no longer declaring war, and things will work out. That doesn't mean that they'll get a state, but it means that things will work out. Then you go a little deeper, let's be honest. The concept of Palestinians in general is a very questionable, if not a complete myth. In the 60s already, Palestinians themselves said, we created a myth called a Palestinian. There's no such thing as a Palestine. What's a Palestine? They were either it was part of Jordan, or was part of the British mandate, or part of Egypt, or part of Syria, and so on. It was made in order to attack Israel. Why couldn't they be absorbed in Jordan, in Egypt? Even now, look at the wall Egypt is building. They don't want them. And maybe the main reason they don't want them is they want them to be a thorn, to do the dirty work. So now you have this people. Now, if they want to be absorbed in Israel as citizens, there are many Arab citizens in Israel that have complete free rights and are even in the Knesset and are elected and have all the services. So what do you want exactly? You want to be absorbed in one of these countries? By all means, go there. Israel is going to give a part of itself, which a bare, flimsy little piece of land, that it won in defensive wars against all these countries, to what? To an enemy. Makes totally no sense. If France, or Egypt for that matter, or Syria, or the United States wants to give a little piece of land for the Palestinians to go live there, who would stop them? The Jewish people are in their homeland. the whole land that goes back thousands of years. Were the Arabs living there before? Yes, but Jews were also living there. Arabs want to live peacefully. They by all means can live, but they have to follow laws. You cannot have an enemy within you and say, here's a state for you because you want a state. Let them live in peace for 10, 15, 20 years, whether it was Gaza or anywhere else. And then let them talk about peace. Let them demonstrate peace. But the bottom line is time and again, 1948, then 1956, and 1967, and 1973, and the 80s, and now in 2024. So I think it's pretty clear. This is not about a discrimination against any group of Arabs or Muslims or whatever name you want to give them. Why is it called the West Bank, by the way? You know why? The West Bank of Jordan. The British mandate gave that part to Jordan. So it's Jordanians, or Syrians, or Egyptians. But they wanted a refugee problem. And I could elaborate a lot more on this. I don't want to go further than this. I think it's pretty clear. So this is not about not being humane. By all means, let them. What happened to the Jews that were kicked out of all the Muslim countries and Arab countries of 1948? They were all absorbed by Israel and made Israel a much stronger country. But no one talks about that. No one talks. It's your brothers and sisters, humanitarian crisis. So why don't you absorb them? What do you think would happen if the Jews were in a humanitarian crisis during World War II? Well, firstly, the world didn't want to absorb them either. But ultimately, that's what you do if you're humane. Absorb. Welcome them. Till they find a new place where to live. Okay. Then the question is the other way around. Why not deport the Arabs and Muslims from Israel? Hi, Rabbi Jacobson. This is the same fellow that's written already a few times. So maybe this will put it to rest. Thank you so much for responding to my question and clarifying your thoughts about the Rebbe's stance on the Arabs in Eretz Yisrael as opposed to Rabbi Kahana. With your permission, one more follow-up question. Based on what you said, the Rebbe was focused on Das Torah. What are the Torah's instructions regarding the issue of allowing the Arabs to remain in the land? With that in mind, being that the Torah clearly teaches us that if you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land from before you, then those whom you leave over will be as spikes in your eyes and thorns in your sides, and they will harass you in the land in which you settle. This is from Sefer Bamidbar, Lamed Gimel Nun Hey. Why wouldn't it be Das Torah to advocate for the removal of the Goyim from the land as Rabbi Kahana advocated, especially since we see, going back for the hundreds of years, that murder, rape, barbarism, and terrorism of Jews are features and not bugs of these Goyim who have lived in the land. My grandfather's cousin was killed in Hebron in 1929, long before the state of Israel. Why wouldn't the Rebbe advocate that now that we have sovereignty in the land, that we remove them as Torah tells us to do? So a few points that have to be made. Das Torah is left to Torah people. We spoke, part of that has to include the mumchim, like doctors, in this case military, to understand the issues of pekuach nefesh, what's dangerous, what's not. The Rebbe is not going to come paskin whether we could take from this pasuk and make that halacha now that we have to kick out all the Arabs and the Muslims. I don't know if Rabbi Kahana was talking from a halachic psak or he was talking politically. And anyway, it's not really relevant to our discussion. The Rebbe was not going to do that. Rabbanim want to come out and say that? Fine. I don't know if there's anyone who's ever said it. Maybe there are. The Rebbe was speaking Das Torah. When I said Das Torah, he's talking what he knows for sure al pi Torah. The fact is, if Arabs live in the country in a peaceful way and they prove themselves as such, I don't know if that someone would say you have to invoke this pasuk. Is it possible they can become your enemy? Yes, it is. Is the pasuk talking today? Is it talking Bisman Abayis when they have control? Bisman L'Osed Love? But partially the pasuk is talking about when they came into Eretz Yisrael after the Kibbutz Shards, Yeshua and so on. So to start applying this to current situation has to be done very responsibly in the proper way. So it makes total sense that Rebbe did not put himself in that place, because this is a combination of both halacha question as well as the facts on the ground, and whether it's even applicable today. The concept, by all means, do not have enemies near you, and if they are, either you deport them, like any country would do, or you put them in prison if they behave in criminal ways. So this, again, is a very balanced approach. It's not saying to do it, not to do it. It's based, take everything into account and figure out what's the best plan. The key is to be all come out of strength. So again, I hope that puts it to rest. And with that, let's move to some other topics. So let's go back to what should be our attitude to Zionism and to displaying the Israeli flag and singing Hatikva. So I've already done 2 parts on this. A lot of it more the ideological part, with a little of the practical, but I want to just sum it up, and hopefully now we can just finish the topic as much as possible in some of the more practical questions. So we discussed the different theological opinions on the matter, the difference between before 1948 and after 1948, and today how you can support a government of services. It doesn't mean it has to be a Mishal Alpitera. It's not Beis David. It's not Mashiach's times. It's Mashiach's times, I should say. But it's not a Mamshala Tachs Mashiach. That will be under Beis David. And the whole thing will be a whole different world based on Torah and mitzvahs as the Rambam paskins. But that doesn't mean we don't support the very fact. You support everywhere. You pay the taxes. A country, a government that provides services, provides protection, especially the military, who are mamish the highest of all levels, as they protect and defend innocent people. So we discussed all that, and I don't want to go over it again. I suggest if you want to hear about that, just go to last week and 2 weeks ago. We discussed it at length. Again, the different opinions and before and after. And also the theological elements behind it. We also discussed the 3 oaths. Lo Sala B'chema. The Jews shouldn't en masse come and conquer Israel and incite the nations around them, and the different opinions on that as well, whether that applies today, whether it ever applied, whether it was Agoda, and if it applies, what form does it apply, if at all. And there's much to talk about it in Sfarim, and I mentioned it also relatively at length. But there's some other points that we didn't finish, and I want to continue with that regarding the very symbols of the Israeli flag and Hatikva, the anthem. So as I explained, these are symbols of secular Zionism. So though, yes, there are many, many Jews, and soldiers included, that these are their symbols, the symbols of the state. And they wave the flag and they sing the song, and it's all part of that unity. And today we see gatherings where they do that, these symbols. So I was talking about it conceptually. What is the symbolism of it, and why some people are opposed to the symbols? But that's a whole other story of what you do today, when there's a war being fought, and you have people coming together in communities, and joining, and let's say they community event, and they sing Hatikva. Should you not participate? Should yes participate? That's what I'd like to address now. Because it's 2 separate things. One is the concept. There are many things that we have to know theologically what it stands for. So to say that the Star of David, or the flag, or the Hatikva represents Mashiach ben David, it doesn't say anywhere such a thing. To say that it has symbolic value to many, absolutely. So the question is, how do we address it? So if it was not times of war, not sensitive times, we could sit and somewhat in a detached way discuss these symbols and how they apply to our lives. And should that be the symbol of Yiddishkeit? Maybe the symbol of Yiddishkeit should be Torah mitzvahs. And don't try to replace it with something else, as we discussed as well. But this again, before I go into the more nitty-gritty, is not a war against it. Our focus has to be on the positive. Israel didn't begin in 1948, it began thousands of years ago. Zionism is not something from the 19th century. Zionism is from Tzion, from Torah, Tzion b'mishpat tipoda v'shaveh b'tzedakah, s'achzenein v'shuv chilit Tzion b'rachemim. As we discuss what it means. So our approach has to be is to broaden our relationship, strengthen our relationship, not compete. So you have your symbol, we have our symbol. No. Let's talk about the bigger picture. What's our relationship with Eretz Yisrael? Why did Hashem give us this land? What is its connection to Torah? What is its connection to Am Yisrael? The triad of Shleimus Haaretz and Shleimus HaTorah and Shleimus HaAm. The people, the Torah and the land. And the goal of bringing Mashiach and Geula, not just to Israel, but to the whole world. That has to be the focus. not on the differences. But yes, you could have a distraction. It's like, why would a certain symbol I might not support? Because that symbol distracts me from the main thing. And maybe that was the intention. That many people embrace that symbol for good reasons. I'm not denying that. We're not arguing that point. But if you're asking, certain individuals will say that symbol represents something that was a godless Israel, Israel without Torah, Israel without Shleimus Ha'am, Shleimus HaTorah. But now comes this particular situation. You're not just going to an event, period. You're going to an event during a time of war. There's a solidarity among many Jews who have different opinions. What do you do then? So let's address that now. Can you be a Zionist and not display the Israeli flag and sing its anthem? So based on what I spoke about now, and last week especially, the answer is absolutely. It's not like a monopoly. The only way to express your love of Zion is through these particular symbols. Those symbols reflect the state of Israel for 1948. But I'm not getting now into, we're not talking about opposing, but that necessarily, you can be a very passionate Zionist. Look, the Lubavitcher Rebbe never went to Eretz Yisrael. So you could say, you know what? How could he talk about a land? He never went there. But I don't know if there's a man on earth that spoke more about it, that cared more about it, that slept less, that lost more sleep about it. So you go into 770, you're not going to find these symbols, but you find the love of Eretz Yisrael, the support, sending people, his own people there. The Rebbe in his own personal, whether Mashiach didn't come yet or Hashem didn't lead him there, that doesn't take away from the power and the centrality of Yiddishkeit. We daven there 3 times a day to Eretz Yisrael. Does that mean a person is less Zionist because, let's say, they don't have an Israeli flag or sing the anthem? Absolutely not. So the mere fact is somewhat of a little manipulative of someone to say, well, that's today the symbol. That's the only way you can connect to. It's not true. You can connect in ways even deeper than that, because that can be just external symbols. There are people who live their whole blood, sweat, and tears is all about Eretz Yisrael all the time. Can a person have both? That's possible. But the question is here, can one do that without displaying? And the answer is absolutely yes. Okay. Should we allow these displays in our organizations? So, every organization has to look at themselves and what they stand for, who they represent. It's like anything. If you're talking about a Chabad organization, so we have from the Rebbe directives in this, which was not to display the flag, but for that matter, not to display any flag, and not to sing Hatikvah, for the reasons I enumerated. Not in the form of war. That's not. So if you run such an organization, it's not about you and your opinion. You have to ask what the Rebbe would say. In some cases, the Rebbe pointed out, through secretaries or himself, that since some people are not necessarily embrace those symbols, why do we have to have symbols that would maybe alienate some? However, here's the other side of the story. What happens if a family comes to you, or mothers come to you and they say, and this is a true story, that's why I'm sharing it, that I have students in your school, Chabad school, and I'd like to come in the morning and sing with them Hatikvah, now in the time of war, with an Israeli flag, and other mothers want to do that as well. It's your Chabad school. So from a Chabad point of view, it's not something you do. And you can explain it. We're not talking about with love and kindness. If you can explain it and diffuse the issue, by all means. But let's say you can't. So here's more of a common sense solution. Being that you're a Chabad organization, you can't formally endorse it. It's also not a time to go into a fight over it. So I would say to the parents, hey, you want to do it on yours, by all means. Just like they would do it in their homes. They're doing it in your school, fine, you look the other way, and you don't make a big issue of it. It's not your policy, it's not anti your policy. This is not necessarily something that's Yareg Val Yaver. We talked before about the 3 sins you have to die before you do it: idolatry, murder, and incest. This is more of a practical thing, especially in a time like this, You start making an issue, the issue become bigger than it's worth it. So you're going to start making an issue and say, no, we can't allow it here. And the mother will go and tell other mothers, and the mothers will tell others, and it'll become a whole thing. And those that don't like you are going to use it against you. So that's the way I would advise on a very practical level. Obviously, if you're an organization that has a rabbi, a rav, you should ask your rav. I'm not paskin for you. But if you ask me as common sense, that to me makes the most sense, especially in a time like this. The same would be if somebody came into your shul. You're speaking, you're talking in support of Israel, and then someone takes out a flag and starts waving it. What are you going to do? Tell them to leave the shul? You ignore it. So they did it. Which leads me to the next question. Should we not participate in events that have these displays? If you don't want to participate, then it makes no big difference one way or the other. It's your choice. But if you're a public figure and you don't participate, it'll get people's attention, then what's wrong with the participating? You're not endorsing everything you go there to. My point is you have to be careful not to make a ikr a tofel and a tofel a ikr. If you could educate people when the time comes, what is the meaning of these symbols and why Chabad does not embrace these symbols, by all means. But I don't know if now is the time for it. Because someone will say to you, 1 second, our young boys are going to the army and they are fighting and dying with a flag in their hand and singing Atikva. And you can't participate. So I don't think it's so emotionally charged. If it was Yarigla Yaver, something you must sacrifice, you have to sacrifice your life for it. I don't know if it's in that category. I know it's not in that category. That's why I'm giving my opinion here. You may not like the opinion, you may not agree, but I'd love to hear an alternative opinion. To get into a fight over this doesn't make sense to me, especially in a time like this. Not everything has to be your official endorsement. There are things, people come to your Shabbos table and they do something that's not Shabbosdik. You have to point out and say, I'll kick you out unless you do. We have ways that we have to be. The Rebbe, famous story with a person, unfortunately, he would drive on Shabbos to 770. He was the person who paid off the mortgage in 770. And the Rebbe ignored it. He knew that people knew he parked his car somewhere and he would sit by Fabrengen. But several years went by. Then one Fabrengen, the Rebbe told him, time to leave your keys here. What the Rebbe knew beforehand. Why suddenly now? Because the Rebbe understood he was not ready yet. Whatever reason. It's not justifying and it's not endorsing. Sometimes you have to not always, you have to know where to fight your battles. Win a battle, not win the war, not just a battle. It's not short term. Just to give examples, which needs discretion because you don't want to make mistakes. Because you could say, with that, I can compromise everything with such justification. That's why you need a mashpia. You need someone that can help you work it through. Okay. What is our stance with the Israeli flag? How should we react if we see our students in a regular Lubavitch Mason and Crown Heights distributing Israeli flag paraphernalia? I saw my students doing so with the flags on my desk and said we support Israel, but suggested they think twice about whether Zionist symbols reflect their values based on everything I had been taught. They didn't take it so well. After looking it up further, I really don't know if I did the right thing, and I want to know how the Rebbe would have wanted us to handle it. So I take the approach I said till now. You have to first determine what will the consequences of what you're doing right now. If it's students that are under your control, you could just say we have a policy. If it's going to become a whole issue, then you have to diffuse it some way. If you can explain it, by all means, bring together parents, bring together students, and explain. You can use some of the excerpts that I've said to explain. But only if it's being escapable. If it gets emotional and people don't hear what you're saying, it defeats the purpose. So I would not change policy. No, we don't change policy. We don't change the things that we know are a certain way. The question is whether we look at it, whether we fight over it, whether we make it into an issue. That's how I would approach it. And I think I feel strongly that the Rebbe would say the same thing. I know people will quote, what do you mean the Rebbe took his name off the yeshiva when they sang Atikva? First of all, yeshiva's Temchet Mimim, the Rebbe's name on it, and it wasn't that he had to sing Atikva. They could have easily not sung it. It wasn't a situation of everyone's emotionally charged in the middle of a war or something. I'm not saying that may have changed the Rebbe's position. I can't speak for the Rebbe. But there's the Rebbe's personal name on the yeshiva. That's his right to do so. Does that mean that every Moshe Chabad, if someone ended up singing Atikva for whatever reason, and it wasn't formal officially, that the Rebbe would take off his name? I don't know. If you did it officially, and Chatchila, it's one thing. I never said that change your official position. I said some things should be overlooked, some things should just be passed over. Now there's more questions, but the thing is we've run out of time. So I will, since it's an important topic, I'll continue till I finish all the questions, because I don't want to leave this hanging, but we'll stop here. The bottom line is chiyuv. We are Eiv Eitziyin. Our whole lives, we live with Yerushalayim, we live with Zion, we live with Eretz Yisrael, in every possible way. It's central to Yiddishkeit, the land of Israel, the Torah of Israel, the people of Israel. That's what we have to emphasize, with tremendous love. And the more that's there, when someone sees you love someone in the deepest possible way, the fact that you may not wear a symbol that others will become far less of an issue, because the person loves. If you feel, you're you're negative, that's where the problems begin. That's overall, and especially now where we need Avos Yisrael and Achdus Yisrael more than ever. And we need the fifth Shulchan Aruch, common sense. So with that, let's sum up and speak already in the third week of Chodesh Adar Rishon. Marbim b'simcha should only be simcha by Eden. God should protect Eden everywhere. We should finally have the Gula Amitis Vashlema and the true Malchus Beis David in Eretz Yisrael. When I say true, I mean the true leadership, the way the Torah wanted it to be, with the coming of Mashiach, the rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi, Kibbutz Goliath, Gula Amitis Vashlema in the fullest sense of the word. May it happen immediately. This has been My Life Chassidus Applied. We're here every Sunday, 8 to 9 p.m. Called Tuv, Afreilich and Chodesh Adar, and Afreilich and Tamid.
This program is brought to you by My Life Chassidus Applied. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at chassidusapply.com/donate.